first started skating with my friend. He had an extra board, and then he just gave it to me, and I've been skating ever since. Well, when I don't land a trick and I have my mind set on something, and I'm not getting what I want, I just keep going for it until I get it right. My mom, she didn't go to college, so she wants me to experience that whole thing, and so I could end up getting like a good job. I think to get into college, I'll have to be determined, just like when I want to get a new trick, and skating's helped me realize I've got what it takes.
Good evening. I'm Pat Smith. Welcome to Inside Out. This is where we take you inside state, local, and federal government and bring that information out to you. Tonight, to help us do that, we have County Council member Craig Rice. He's from District 2. Craig, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, you know, I'm born and raised here in Montgomery County. I grew up going to public schools, went to Tacoma Park, and then Montgomery Blair High School. It's part of the first math science, computer science magnet program. So I consider myself a great success of our public schools and try and always give that as an example. Married with 3 kids. One of my children goes to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. I've got another at Matsunaga Elementary School in Germantown that's one of the largest elementary schools in the county and also in the state. And then I've got a young daughter that's about to start kindergarten in the fall.
Wow. And so the oldest is high school age, 16?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned.
Yes.
College right ahead.
You've got it. You've got it.
How about college? Where'd you go?
I actually went to University of Illinois, and then unfortunately had a family tragedy and moved back here. Ended up finishing at the University of Maryland with a computer science degree. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me. I tell you, it's one of those where you think you have a path carved out for you. You know, math, science, computer science major. Was in Naval ROTC. Was down at Corpus Christi, Texas, flying with ensigns down there, and then, you know, years later now I'm in politics. It's funny, there was a young lady that came before the county council maybe about a week ago and said she was in the aerospace engineering magnet program. I told her, oh, I majored in aerospace engineering. Who knows, one day you might end up here as a member of the county council.
Right.
And other people on the dais said, no, hopefully she's smarter than that. So.
Well, your first term in the council, you just got elected. Before we do that, the legislative session has just ended. You recently served 1 term in the State House of Delegates. How did you find that experience?
It's amazing. And just finishing up with the Maryland General Assembly session closing just yesterday, I was down there to watch some of the last-minute votes that closed. And it's a very different dynamic. I often tell people that in serving in the State House, you know, you tend to be a little bit higher up in altitude, not being able to see all the different things that are going on in your neighborhood. You're dealing with a lot of large policy issues, not very specific, but on the council, you're dealing with people's everyday lives. You know, you're right there on the street with them, understanding that some of the decisions that we make have a direct impact on what's happening in people's lives. And I think that that's extremely important. And that's always something that I wanted to do in politics. I love the policy, but I also love being able to see the direct impact and have a role in making sure that the implementation of those policies are done correctly and that they're doing what we intended them to do.
One thing they did do, and I know it's tough economic times, they passed another sin tax by raising the tax on alcohol from 6% to 9%. That's a 50% increase.
Yes.
Now, Montgomery County's in the liquor control business. We wholesale everything in Montgomery County. It brings about $27 million to the general fund. What do you think the impact on that increase is going to be? Do you think it's a bonus for the liquor stores in the District of Columbia?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's something we're going to have to take a look at. I think that a lot of folks like the system that we have in place here in Montgomery County. Like the fact that we have convenient liquor stores that are located in areas that they can get to. Don't have to worry about the proliferation of many liquor stores throughout their neighborhoods on all the different corners, which we've heard are complaints from constituents in neighboring jurisdictions. The tax is definitely a significant increase. The one thing that I will say that's good about it is that we do have money that's now going to our developmentally disabled community. That's a huge plus. And we also have some money that's going back to our education system as well. And so while we understand that people are going to be paying a little bit more, at the same time, at least it's going for some good causes.
So we're getting some money back in the county from that particular tax.
We are.
Targeted money.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, explain to our viewers what exactly the role of the county council is.
Well, this is council, and it's a very interesting dynamic, and I oftentimes use a comparison between the state and the county, and that Maryland is very unique, and that it's got one of the most powerful governors in the nation. And because the General Assembly can only cut from a budget, it can't add. And so once the governor proposes that budget, they're pretty much set and can only work within those constraints. And then you fast forward to our Montgomery County Council, to where our council has final budgetary authority over what happens for Montgomery County and sets that vision. The county executive has a proposal and has sent over his proposed budget, but we can cut, add. Obviously, we have to meet our debt and make sure that we're protecting our AAA bond rating. All of those kinds of nuances come into play, but it's in the complete purview of the council to totally scrap any plans that were put before us by any county executive and start over from scratch. Now, I'm not saying that we should do that, but it's just a very interesting dynamic because it makes for a very powerful council. And so it gives us the ability to do so many things, from restructuring the way we do government. And you've heard a lot about us talking about our structural deficit and our structural problems within government. So we have the ability as the council to do those kinds of things when it comes to pension reform, when it comes to revamping our departments, when it comes to, there are only a few taxes that the council has purview over, including the largest, which is the property tax, but complete purview over that. But we also deal with the services that everybody utilizes, whether you're of positive economic means or whether you're of lower economic means and need to use safety net services. We're all, we're all encompassing, from your rec departments to your golf courses to the air park. It really runs the gamut. And so there's so many different things. But then also, let's fast forward to zoning for where we place our houses in the county, where we place businesses, how those businesses need to be licensed and operated. I mean, we touch pretty much every aspect of your life. And I think that it's important for folks to understand that and to weigh in, so that if they have challenges and have problems, but also if they have ideas and suggestions, we always want to hear from them.
Well, when you mentioned zoning, and we have a zoning board, a board of zoning or whatever, does the council have final say, or does the Board of Zoning? Is Board of Zoning only advisory?
Well, what we can do is, and I'll give you an example of what happened in Clarksburg. We have a master plan that sets aside where certain things should happen, and that's proposed by the planning board and ratified by the council. But what happens is that if constituents come to us and say that they think that something's wrong or that we should be doing something differently when it comes to allowing a business to proceed, when it comes to allowing a house to do something different, we have the authority to make those kinds of changes. And so it gives us the ultimate say-so in terms of the vision for the county, where we see things. And so, of course, we don't want to be involved in every single zoning process, and that's why we have these boards that are there to make those decisions and not make it all about political, but to make it about those particular issues and treat each one on a case-by-case basis. But there are special exceptions, and that's why we actually call it a special exception hearing. There are special exceptions that come about where we as council members can weigh in and say, you know what, we don't think that that was the intent, and we want to make an exception in this case. When it came to Clarksburg, we had a vision for retail only starting in the Clarksburg Town Center. But unfortunately, Clarksburg Town Center has fallen on difficult times and hasn't been able to pull in a grocery store for that area. And so we supported a master plan amendment that would allow a grocery store to be built elsewhere in Clarksburg if Clarksburg Town Center couldn't find a tenant. And so now that process is moving forward, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you'll see that ratified by the full council. So that's just an example of some of the things that we can do when we see things that aren't working the way we want them to weigh in and kind of jumpstart the process.
Understood. Is there a grocery store lined up that's interested in going to the location you're looking at for a special exception?
I have heard from the developers. You know, we haven't been involved in those negotiations, but the developers have said that they have expressed interest from a number of people who were thinking about coming into Clarksburg. And so that's a great positive sign for them. They've been sitting stagnant for quite some time, and so we're really, really happy and pleased about that.
Unlike, well, like the town center in Rockville had a lot of interest in a grocery store right there in the town center. In fact, one was paying rent for quite some time.
That's right.
And just never had a deal worked out with the developer that satisfied the city council in Rockville, so they don't have one. Downtown Rockville lost Magruder's, and they have nothing.
And it's a shame, because I was actually on the state delegation, and the county executive had come to us and at that time asked the state delegation to allow for a liquor license for the store to help in terms of its viability. And we actually supported the county executive and the council in making that decision, which was very difficult, going against the Maryland state 3-tier system.
Right.
So, you know, we tried to do our part, we then being the House delegation, in working with the council to try and make that happen. So it's sad that that didn't come through, because I think that that's something that definitely needs to happen for Rockville.
So you mentioned the state of Maryland 3-tier system. Would you explain that?
Sure. It's very interesting in
for
terms
liquor licensing regulations.
Yeah, it's a very confusing, antiquated system that we wish we could have more control over. But unfortunately, what happens in the state of Maryland is the state of Maryland has its own state laws regarding beer, wine, and liquor. Then it's also got its county laws that affect it, and then it's got local city ordinances as well. So you've got 3 different tiers of working within. So you can imagine, from a restaurateur, a bar owner that has to adhere to all of these different policies. It makes it very confusing and difficult. Some of them overarch and overlap each other in terms of who has ultimate control. I know that there was actually a bill before the state delegation dealing with extending the hours for serving alcohol. And the city of Annapolis was actually the one that brought this bill to its knees and ended up ultimately killing the bill, something that the Restaurant Association and a lot of other bar owners were in full support of. And so it's very interesting that, you know, just all of the little players on each of the individual levels can make such a difference. So people have proposed for a long time to try and do something about breaking this up. So
it's surprising that Annapolis was the one that moved forward in opposition, when their lifeblood is really the harbor area, the port in Annapolis, and all the restaurants and bars and stuff there.
Yeah, but it's all about control. And I think that a lot of times local jurisdictions want to have their own control, and once they see that a larger body, the state, the county, whatever the case may be, is going to have more control over this, they actually see that as a negative, even though it might have a positive effect on their businesses. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Right. When we come back, I want to back, if I forget, remind me, I want to back up on the budget situation and the proposals, because the county executive, as we discussed, he proposes a budget.
Yes.
The county council can either add to it or subtract from it or move money from one agency to another. Well, when we come back, we want to talk about the Board of Education and the superintendent of schools and what their role is in the budgetary process.
Excellent.
You're watching Inside Out. I'm Pat Smith. With me this evening is County Council member from District 2, Craig Rice. We'll be right back.
Welcome home, man.
Welcome back. I'm Pat Smith. You're watching Inside Out, where we take you inside state, local, and federal government and bring that information out to you. Helping me do that tonight is County Council member from District 2, Craig Rice. Craig, just before the break, I promised we'd come back and talk about, on the budget process, what is the process for the school department's budget?
Well, you know, it's very interesting in the sense that the school department itself normally tries to work out a budget between the local school board and its superintendent, then presents that to the county executive, who then deals with the school board and the superintendent to come up with a deal. And mainly at that point, it's the superintendent. The county executive and the superintendent meet and finalize a deal. Then that's put before the council
As part of the budget
as part of the
proposal.
entire budget proposal. Exactly. The problem with that is that we're the final budgetary authority, and we haven't had a chance to meet with the school board to talk about what we think is the direction they might want to go in. And so it creates a difficulty. And it's not even just the school board. I mean, the school board represents over $2 billion of our county's $4 billion budget. So roughly a little bit over half of the budget is the school system. And for us to not be involved in that negotiation process from the beginning is troubling. And it's very difficult as a new council member to try and get your hands around something that's so large in a short period of time. And so one of the things that I've talked to the council president about is proposing that we change how we do things when it comes to the council. There's no law that says it has to be that way, but I think that it would be extremely helpful for us as a council to be involved in all of the negotiation processes from the beginning. It just makes the most sense because we're going to be making those budgetary decisions for those departments anyway. But I can tell you this, that, you know, I think that the county council president, Valerie Irvin's done a great job of getting us as much information as quickly as possible so that we can try and make the best decisions that we can. And so I'm really appreciative of that, especially being a new council member.
Well, do you have the authority to call the superintendent in before the council or a committee in order to question them about the necessity of certain expenditures or whatever?
We do, and I don't think that the superintendent would ever refuse a meeting from the council president. I think that that's where it should come from, and that needs to be the new process. You know, not all 9 council members, I think, need to be sitting in the room as these negotiations happen. I'm all for a part of a standardized process, and that would kind of hinder the process. But I think that the council president, at least, needs to be a part of that, along with the county executive, and meeting with all of the various stakeholders and coming up with some negotiations, so that then there's been a participation in the negotiation process from the beginning, because we also have our union contracts that are negotiated by the county executive, and then they look to the county council to fund those. Again, you're asking to sign a check for something that you haven't played any part in talking about how we can best afford that and whether or not these decisions make sense. I will also point out the interesting thing this year is that the county executive actually had meetings with our union stakeholders, came up with arbitration agreements, but decided not to put any of those arbitrated agreements into his budget proposal, which was very different. You know, we haven't seen that. Every single one was very different from the arbitrator's decision. And so that's made it even more difficult for us as a council to try and be fair to our union stakeholders and trying to make some sort of a deal.
Do you have any undercurrent of the strip the unions of their authority, as has gone on in some other jurisdictions?
No, you know, we don't have a union problem here in Montgomery County, nor do I think we have a union problem here in the state of Maryland. I think that we made decisions, and I don't think we were very mindful from a future-looking perspective in terms of how we'd be able to afford to fund the decisions that we made in supporting our unions. You know, I'm one of the first people that says that we need to support our teachers and support our schools. You know, do I think that if we could, we should pay our teachers more? There's no question. But in tough fiscal times, it's also important for us to make sure that everybody is helping us to get us on the right foot. And so part of the challenge has been, this is the 300-pound elephant in the room is that MCPS has consistently said that they didn't want to take furloughs. They said that last year, and that was a part of the current budget proposal for this year. In fact, they asked for $82 million above the funding for last year. Some of that encompassed the increase in student population, but it also included increases for teachers. Once again, I'm all for increasing for our teachers. Being the son of a teacher and a principal, you know, there's no question about the great work that they do. But when we're cutting services to our disabled and to our safety net services, you know, those are being cut with Health and Human Services. We've got public safety services that are being cut. You look at across the line libraries, you know, took an inordinate cut. All of these are reductions. At the same time, I can't say that I'm going to then give an increase to our school system. You know, our county residents utilize everything, not just our schools.
But the cuts to Health and Human Services, what did they encompass?
A lot. I mean, when you're talking about a 5% cut to the service provider contracts that go out, so when the Department of Health and Human Services contracts out with different agencies to provide services for the homeless, for the aging, for the disabled, we're now cutting those contracts by 5%, which means the person who's making $12 an hour, taking care of someone, bathing them, washing them, cleaning them, changing their diapers, is taking a 12% pay cut, or a 5% pay cut, I'm sorry, off of that $12 an hour salary. That's a lot to ask, you know, and also hope that that person's still going to be providing good, solid service to our constituents. That's the caveat. You know, we can continue to cut, but we also want to make sure that the services that are being provided are quality. And you get to a point where you start going below that level, and it becomes extremely concerning. And you don't want people to fall through the cracks either. And that's where we are. I mean, we're really at a tipping point, so we have to be extremely careful about the cuts we're instituting.
Especially what I was concerned about on the Health and Human Services was on the front side, the investment of providing for, and in the education department, for pre-K, for prenatal care.
That's right.
For things of that nature that give a healthy young child the opportunity, just because they're in a poverty level, but they have some opportunity to exposure, they'll give them the opportunity to pull themselves up.
You're absolutely right. We just had a hearing yesterday going over some of the Health and Human Services budget, and we were going line by line over some of the items. The Maternity Cares program that provides, you know, and helps with prenatal care, we're reducing that budget. When it comes to some of the pre-kindergarten classes and courses that we offer, both contracted and with MCPS, we're reducing those numbers. When it comes to tutoring and support programs, linkages to learning, we're reducing those programs. These are all things that matter when you're talking about children that are suffering. And so, again, that's why I want to make sure that folks out there understand where we are. I know that people are passionate. Me having 3 children in the school system, I understand it's important to have strong schools. But if we don't have the support structure for once those kids step out of those schools and go home, or go to shelters and don't have food at home and don't have parents that can take care of them, what happens to those children then? And so we need to make sure that we're protecting all aspects of their lives, not just while they're in the classroom.
Exactly right. What other budgetary concerns did you want to discuss?
Well, you know, one of the things
I'd like to talk about the police department and cutting their budget in half, just like the Pentagon. But anyway,
definitely. Well, you know, it's interesting when you talk about the police for the first time. Although we've instituted cuts that will mean cuts in services, one of the key things that stands out is our school resource officers. We have school resource officers that we have 9 of them in our school system now in our high schools. It's been reduced from 24 before, and this is extremely concerning because when you talk about the joint collaboration between our school system and our police and making sure that our children are safe, but saying that this program is going to go away would be extremely detrimental. And so we're working very hard to try and find the money to restore this program.
That's a good example of what I'm talking, and I would call not spending, but investing.
That's exactly right.
So that those environments in the high schools are more productive and more conducive to learning and what they're for, and help control the deportment in the schools, because the teachers are without any control over deportment virtually.
So true.
That those should be fully staffed with more than the 24 officers that they were, instead of out there driving around in cruisers that get 10, 12 miles a gallon, whatever they get, and you know,
No,
the 8 of them respond to a car accident.
right.
You know?
You're absolutely right. And I think this is an example of where we can either be proactive or reactive. We can be proactive in the sense of preventing incidents from happening at our high schools by having school resource officers in our schools. Or we can be reactive in terms of waiting until a crime is committed, not only in our school, but in the community right outside of the school, and react by locking them up. And I think that, you know, this program has been extremely successful, although there have been some challenges, and we need to look at revamping the program and making it stronger. And that happens with any program. But I think that the most important thing for us to do is to understand the relationship between the students and these officers has kept a lot of the crimes that would have happened out of the paper.
Absolutely.
This is a program that's not going to hear, you know, and get the accolades on the front page of the Gazette or the Washington Post, because what they're in the business of doing is keeping incidents from getting there. And so it's extremely important for me to make sure that we're supporting this program. I think that it'll be a huge win for us.
So the county council has the final vote on that?
Correct. Correct.
The proposal from the police department's budget was that it be cut back even further down to...
That's right, to zero.
Down
So
to
it'd be
zero.
totally eliminated, and I don't think that would just be a huge mistake for us, especially since the state of Maryland just last year passed the Safe Schools Act that allowed for the school resource officers in schools to collaborate with our state's attorney's office
Right.
when it comes to communicating and getting more information and information sharing that would be beneficial to all involved. So here we have a state law that's passed that we fought for that would help us with our school resource officers, and then the following year we're looking at cutting the school resource officers while other jurisdictions are actually ramping up the program.
I think you ought to go back and make a proposal that you take 15 cruisers off the street and put them back into the school.
Well, it's extremely important for us, and we will find the money. At least that's my major push, is to make sure that we find the money to make that happen. We've got to keep this program alive.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I want you to make sure our viewers know how to get in contact to you. I know you want to be very receptive to their ideas and their comments.
No question. I encourage all of the viewers out there to contact me at my office in Rockville. The telephone number is 240-777-7955. They can also reach us via our website, which is www.montgomerycountymd.gov. And on there they can click on the link for County Council. I actually do regular updates called Rice Reports, where every 2 weeks I give people a snapshot of what's happening in Rockville and give them an idea of what some of the bills that we're working on are. And so it's extremely important for me. Plus I also have a Facebook page, Council Member Craig Rice.
And if they go to your website,
Yes.
they can subscribe to those Rice reports and get them
Exactly.
automatically every 2 weeks.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because for me, it's always been about making sure that we're communicating to our constituents, letting them know what's going on, but I also want to hear from them. I mean, that's how a lot of our great ideas get going.
Craig, thank you very much for coming in. That concludes our show. We've had with us council member from District 2, Craig Rice. He's new to the council, but obviously, as you've heard, very articulate and on top of the issues. I'm Pat Smith. This was Inside Out.